There are so many things to do, so many people to meet, and so many places to explore.
It's delivered excellent gunplay to pair with an intense and effective campaign.
And being a jerk of a goose is just a ton of fun.
Just so damn satisfying.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Stapleton. This is Tina Amini, my boss. I am the executive editor of reviews here at IGN, and I want to tell you about a change we're making for the new decade of game, movie, TV, and comic reviews at IGN. Basically, this is a change I've been pushing for quite a few years. But we are dropping the decimal from our reviews and just going to a flat 10-point scale. And we wanted to walk you through some of the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, so we previously had been on a 100-point scale, which we put into, we'd been doing for a long time, and then at 2010, we dropped to a 20-point scale, meaning half decimal points, or rather half points for a 0.5 system. And then we swapped back over to a 100-point scale in 2012. I believe we tested it out on Borderlands 2 review. And the reason for that was we wanted to display a certain level of nuance. I think at the time we were trying to review on different systems, so there was a level of math that you could kind of equate there to, like, what was Borderlands 2 on PS2 versus the Xbox 360? What were the performance differentiations there? But also we have a larger pool of reviewers, so we didn't have that smaller pool of writers that you were more familiar with, and so you can kind of track their taste differentiations, because ultimately, as we like to remind people, reviews are, a specific opinion from a specific reviewer that we found to be qualified for that specific review.
And for my part, I think a 100-point scale conveys the idea that this is a scientific process, or that there's some math involved behind the scenes that led us to arrive at a specific score, when really that's not the case. What we're really trying to do is convert what the reviewer is saying about how a game made them feel into a code. And the number is code for a word, which we always display next to the review score. And that's really what we're trying to convey. Adding an extra number next to that, like the logic for that has always been, we want a 10-point scale within a 10-point scale. And is this game closer to an 8 or closer to a 6, basically, when we're giving it something in the 7 range? And that, in theory, is nice, but the fact is, in practice, it gets confusing and it gets arbitrary when you're deciding between a 6.5 and a 6.6. It's like, what does that difference mean? It's like, well, one is higher than the other, but is that really meaningful? Not necessarily. So I think with the switch to a 10-point scale, we're getting really distinctly meaningful steps at every number on the scale.
Yeah, it's a little more definitive and helps us reassert our scoring system, which ultimately comes down to, is it a masterpiece, is it amazing, or is it just mediocre, which relates to our scores, essentially.
And granted, it is fair to say that the bottom half of the scale, from 1 to 4 and kind of 5, is just different flavors of calling a game bad. And that's fair criticism, but we find that if we were to drop that and go to a 5-point scale, then we lose the really iconic IGN 10 out of 10. And scores out of 10 is become really synonymous with our brand over the years. This allows us to preserve that instant recognition that people have of IGN scores, while also just being clearer and more concise and more definitive with our scores.
Yeah, and this is part of a larger conversation that we've consistently been having across the site and amongst the staff, just of all the ways that we can improve and continuously take the feedback that we're receiving, both from our staff and our readers, to determine, are we doing this system in the best way possible? Are there tweaks that we can make to make it feel more modernized, which this to us feels like a more modernized way of conveying and communicating our feelings on a game without getting too hung up on the nitty-gritty of like a 0.9 versus a 0.8 and what are the mathematical differentiations of those things. So this feels a lot more suited to how we're trying to convey our opinions around games.
Yeah, and people get kind of lost in the weeds trying to reverse engineer from the text, like why did that game get 0.1 higher than this one? And that's really not something that's meaningful. It's a kind of a distraction from what we're trying to say.
Yeah, we absolutely want people to be making comparisons and determining like Borderlands 3 from Borderlands 2 and the nuances there, but hoping that effectively that conversation comes back into the fold of what the text of a review has also signified about that game too.
Exactly, like a number score has ever only been a summary. And a summary, by definition, leaves out a bunch of information. So if you want the full information about why we gave a game the score that we did, that should be made absolutely clear in the text.
And you should hopefully also be following all of the bylines that we have on the site, and you can kind of start to pick up on people's tastes, and we have a lot of future ideas and product ideas about how we can better help convey our staff to you and better help convey what their tastes are, so you can begin to get a following for people and say, like, you know, Brian Altano's opinions are the worst, but, you know, Dan Stapleton's is definitely my favorite. Sorry,
All that
Brian.
is true.
So that's hopefully a development for the positive. There's obviously a lot of debates out there about what scoring systems are good, if scores are good, but this one felt like the most fitting to us. But let us know in the comments what your guys' feedback is.
And we hope you like it.